Welcome to our SPSS class. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at levels of measurement in SPSS. How are variables measured? We already saw when we did a quick review in our previous lesson how what variables are. That a variable is any characteristics, any number or quantity that can be measured or counted. So here, how are these quantity, how are these characteristics, how are these numbers measured? That's what we're going to be looking at here. Now you see, like what I have here on my data window. Meanwhile, the SPSS window is called the data window. So what I have here on my data window, I have my data view, I have my variable view, and here I can just toggle or switch between the data view and the variable view. So under the data view is actually where you enter your data, and under the variable view is where you enter your variable. So now if I want to define my variable, I have to go to my variable view. You do not define variable using the data view. Data view is only when you've defined your variable. You now come to the data view and enter your data. But let's look at the variable view. Now in SPSS, when we come to measure here, we have different types of measure. So let's say, for example, I like to start with ID. Maybe I'm going to have participant ID, and I will just have all of these and all of these, and then measure. I have the here. Under the measure, SPSS measures variables based on qualitative and quantitative. So we can have qualitative variables. Those are categorical variables. We can also have what we call the quantitative variables, and those are scale. So under the qualitative variables, we have the nominal and the ordinal. So just like what you have here, we've seen here ordinal and we've seen here nominal. Now from the name, you already understand that ordinal are actually variables that has a particular order, or has a meaningful rank. For example, we can say age group. So if we are saying age group, maybe when we're having a questionnaire, we can say age group, let's say 20 to 29 or 20 to 30, for instance, 41 to 51. So those are age groups. Or we can have questionnaires where we have questions like, options like agreed, strongly disagreed or disagreed. So all of those are ordinal variables. So we're going to choose the measure type as ordinal. Now, but we have the nominal. Under the nominal, they are just variables or categories without any meaningful rank or order. For example, you may have something like marital status. You cannot rank marital status. You cannot rank, for example, gender, whether someone is a male or female. No, all of those cannot be ranked. So those are nominal measurement. So they are going to be measured as nominal and not ordinal. Then we have the scale. Now on the nominal, you can also have when you have questions like yes or no. For example, you have questions in a questionnaire and the participant are to choose yes or no. All of those comes under the nominal because it doesn't have any meaningful rank. Now on the scale, we have the scale. Scale specifically carries numerical data that is not grouped. So when you have numerical data that is not grouped in your data set, those are to be measured as scale. So they are quantitative variables. For example, you could have something like what is your age in years. So somebody be able to impute, or a participant or respondent will now be entering their age. Maybe say, what is your age in years? 20, 35, 42. So that's an example of a scale variable. And then the next thing you could have another example like, what is your weight? What is your height? How long does it take you to get to work in minutes? For example, what is your growth, or what is your income growth, for instance, or what is your income? So those are examples of scale variables. So it is very, very important that we understand these variable types because it has a whole lot of impact on your analysis. So if you do not classify your measure very well, you may end up having a wrong analysis. So that is why it is very, very important that we understand these different measures here. Like I've said, your variable can either be a scale, ordinal, or nominal. Scale simply means that you have numerical data that is not grouped. All right, for example, what is your age in years? What is your weight? How long does it take you to get to work in minutes? What is your growth, or let's say growth income or income growth? What is your salary? So those are examples of scale variables. Now you can also choose the nominal, of course, when you are dealing with variables that has no meaningful rank, or order. So like something like marital status, something like sex, or maybe questions like yes or no questions. And then you have the ordinal, as the name implies. You see, SPSS is already giving us this symbol here to understand that this one follows a particular order. So meaningful ranks or order. For example, you can now ask maybe like age group, maybe like we're having options like strongly agreed, strongly. Those are actually has been categorized, and they have a particular, they've been ranked. So those are example of ordinal measures. For example, let's just look at, we're just entering the first ID here. Let's assume maybe I have a data containing maybe 10 participants. Of course, participants or the cases are actually the rows, the variables are the columns. So for example, now this is going to be numeric, so the which is not important, you can just leave it. The decimal point, I wouldn't want it to have a decimal, or I would just leave it. And then the label is very, very important. Your variable name should be very short, and it should not begin with a number or a special character. And your variable name should have no spaces. You can actually, and no special characters except for something like underscore. So I can have something like underscore here. So I can say ID underscore name, for instance. And that can be accepted. But you can't just start something like 123 ID. No. Or I just leave it as ID. And then we'll now come to the label. Label actually gives you room to be able to define your variable name very well, and you have to pay attention to your label, because if you don't have a good label, it can actually affect your results, because when you have your chart, it should be properly, or the variables should be properly labeled. For example, let me say I can call this participant ID, for instance. Okay, participant ID. And the good thing here is that you can space, and you can also use numbers here. So here now, these are just participant ID is not categorical, so I'm just putting it here so that I'll be able to know the number of participants I have in my data set. Now under the missing, okay, I'm going to talk about the missing in the next video. I'm going to take time to explain this. So like here I have the column. These are not really necessary, the alignments, whether they are going to be aligned to the right. So of course this one now, whether it's going to be ordinal, nominal, or scale. All right, so it could just be, I'm just entering numbers, so it doesn't really, this is optional, because SPSS is not going to make analysis. I won't do any analysis using the ID. The ID is more like having a serial number, so you can always leave it in whichever way you want it to be. So the row should remain input. So if we go to the data, you can see that I already have my first variable. But if I change it here, the measure to nominal, let's still go back to data view, you can see that SPSS has changed it here. So it's very important you pay attention to your measures. And when you're defining your variables, you should be able to specify whether it is a scale variable, or it is a nominal variable, or it is an ordinal variable. So see you in the next lesson.